Namaskar, welcome to my YouTube channel Exploring Truth. Today's topic is Indo-Chinese relationship, means relationship between India and China throughout the ages. Of course, more importance will be given on the ongoing state of relationship between China and India. One thing has been noticed throughout India that people are very much apprehensive, doubtful about the prospect of relationship between India and China. And in most cases, they cited the war of 1962 as if one war and one skirmish in 1967 damaged as if everything forever, and there cannot be any lasting relationship between China and India. I request only the skeptic people to remember the fact that England and France fought so many wars, including the 100 Years' War. Still, they became friends. They fought the First and the Second World War on the same side. And it is very, very important that Germany and France fought three big wars: the Battle of Sedan, 1870, then the First World War and the Second World War. Still, now they have forced relationship and they are now friends. And in that case, one war in 1962, one skirmish in 1967, compared to what happened in Europe between the so-called friendly countries, we can easily put this war with China and the skirmish behind the screen, and a new relationship can be set up. This can be emphasized on the ground that China and India, two big civilizations, had very good relationships in the past. But even the Chinese President Xi Jinping says that civilizational relationship between the two countries of China and India across the Himalayas. The biggest mountain of the world, the mountain range, the Himalayas, could not hinder the setting up of relationship between China and India in the early period of history. It is known very much that Indian science and religion, specifically Buddhism, influenced China very much to the core of the civilization. And the fact is that though in the whole world Buddhism more or less has withered, except Sri Lanka, Thailand and some other Southeast Asian countries, but still China holds the highest number of Buddhists in that country. Totally 22 crores people, Buddhists, live still in China, whereas the birthplace of Buddhism in India, Buddhism has withered away. So we have to remember the way the Chinese learned things from India, and Indian monks, teachers, philosophers went to China throughout the ages in the past. Chinese monks, philosophers, thinkers came to India. We know the name of Kasapa Matungo, one who in fact went to China in the 1st century CE, Christian era, to spread Buddhism there. And he is highly revered in that country. So many other monks went there, including Quan Kumarojibo, who is highly respected throughout China. And nowadays, a research has been carried out where it is rather pointed out that most probably doubt is there that Kumarojibo was a Greco-Buddhist. He had connections with India as well as with China. We know the name of Bodhidharma, one who went to China. Most probably Bodhidharma was related to Nagarjuna University, Andhra Pradesh, and he was very, very black, and that's why if we come across of his photographs available in the internet, we find his complexion was totally dark. Anyway, whatever it is, this Bodhidharma was the founder of Kung Fu in Shaolin Monastery of China. On the other, he was the founder of Chan Buddhism that became, in course of time, Jain Buddhism in Japan. So this Bodhidharma, he was in fact the founder of Jain Buddhism and the founder of some aspects of martial art, including Kung Fu. So it is very, very important that India influenced China. Chinese monks came to India, and the Chinese silk used to come to India. Chinese trade had been very brisk in the past, and good relationship for thousands of years, no problem. The relationship came to a halt when India was occupied by the Turks. Before the coming of the Turks, we find that great Buddhist monks like Faxian, and after Faxian, Xuanzang, and after Xuanzang, Yijing, after Yijing, Mahuan came to India. Faxian left behind an account about India that in fact narrates the history of the Guptas. And this Xuanzang, he came to India. He was a student of Nalanda University and then a teacher of Nalanda University, a good friend of Harsha Shiladitya. Nearly he stayed in India more than 12 years and then he returned to China. And the Chinese Emperor Taizong was so pleased, having heard the pious activities of King Harsha Shiladitya. He sent a goodwill mission to India with so many presents to be given to King Harsha Shiladitya. And Wang Huanxie was the leader of this Chinese mission. When they came to India, bad luck as would have it, this Harsha Shiladitya had expired, so he could not hand all these things over to him. In course of time, we find that Yijing came to India. Yijing was followed by Mahuan, and all were Chinese monks in search of Buddhist scriptures and knowledge of Buddhism, but carried it away to China. Hundreds of books from Sanskrit and Pali were translated into Chinese languages, and this is fact that there was a Chinese department, Tibetan department also in Vikramshila University, and many students of China used to read in Nalanda University and also in Pushpagiri University as well as in Sompur University of Bengal. Now the thing is that this good relationship has continued for thousands of years, say hundreds of years, for centuries. This came to a halt when the Turks occupied India and Indian administration turned to Islamic. It is fact that the Chinese monks, Chinese pilgrims used to come to India. They found that the Turks were in fact a problem for them, and the ancient institutions of learning, including the universities, had been destroyed by the Turks, of course. For that reason, they did not want to set up any kind of relationship with the Turks in India and then the Afghans. Only we find that Muhammad bin Tughlaq sent Ibn Battuta to China as an ambassador, but to what extent he was able to set up a relationship with the Chinese government is not known. We know it only this much, that he went to China and he came back to India again, and from India after a few years he traveled back to his own country, Morocco. Now this the Turkish rule in India, that is Turkey, as we call them, the Turks, Turkish rule in India, the Afghan rule in India, and afterwards the Mughals. Even during the course of the Mughals rule, we don't find any kind of relationship was set up between China and India. If even there was any kind of it, that did not come to be accorded at all by any side. Then they came the British, and we find that right from the beginning of British rule in India, trouble started with the Chinese. From India, the British Indian government wanted first to set up trade relations with China, and afterwards wanted to occupy their seaports and wanted to set up trade according to their goodwill. And then we find the first Anglo-Chinese War, the second Anglo-Chinese War, and the third Anglo-Chinese War, and to assign the treaties of Nanking, Tianjin, and Peking, ultimately into 1860. And after the Convention of Peking, of course, there was a lull, there was no further war between these two sides, the British Indian government on the other, this Chinese government. But again, the problem cropped up in the year 1904 when Lord Curzon signed the Treaty of Lhasha after a round of war with the Tibetans, where the Tibetans were defeated. Now, this Treaty of Lhasha, as it was in fact one-sided and it was imposed on the Tibetans, so the British Indian government, having signed it, sent it to England for ratification, and in fact the British government in England, that is the home government, did not ratify it. On the other, we find even the Chinese government also became very much apprehensive of the activities and the position taken by the British Indian government against Tibet. And that's why we find they also put some sort of pressure on the British government, and ultimately was signed the Anglo-Chinese Convention in the year 1906. Though this convention was signed, for the temporary period peace was restored, but it was not finalized. Again, then in the year 1914 was convened the Simla Conference, where Henry McMahon, the Surveyor General of India, presided over the meeting. It was attended by Longchen Sotro, the Foreign Minister of Tibet, and Ivan Chen, the Foreign Minister of China. The Chinese Foreign Minister, in fact, did not comply with the line drawn as a border line between India and Tibet, called as the McMahon line. It was in fact a line from mountain cliff to cliff. It was in fact a visual survey done by the British government, and the Surveyor General himself pressed this line on the Tibetans, and his logic was that no better line could be set up, could be put up, could be imagined than this, and they assured the Tibetan government that the line was neither in favor of England, British India, nor in favor of Tibet. It was just a neutral line. Anyway, whatever it is, we find Chinese foreign minister did not accept it, and he turned back to China. Anyway, only this was in fact one stage. Then we find the First World War, the Second World War, and during the course of these two wars, China was in favor of England, and then we find that quarrel started with Japan. 2021 demands Japan put forward to China. First, the Charter of Demand was put forward to Yuan Shikai, one who came to power after Sun Yat-sen, and Yuan Shikai died of heart attack. And after him, we find only one important leader who came up and took up the administration of China, and they could challenge the Japanese, and he was Chiang Kai-shek. Now, by the year 1921, the Communist Party of India came into existence, and since the year 1927, under the leadership of Mao Zedong, the Chinese communists began a two-pronged war. One against Chiang Kai-shek to oust him from power in order to give power for the communists. On the other, they wanted to safeguard the border of China against the Japanese invasion. Anyway, whatever it is, we can imagine that the condition of China was at that time very, very bad. In the year 1938, President of the Indian National Congress, Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, sent a medical mission under Kotnis and Dr. Viraj Bosu Dr. Kotnis and Dr. Viraj Basu to China. And this medical team, as they in fact performed everything according to allopathic system, they in fact treated the patients who were brought from the battlefield wounded and bleeding. In that condition, we find that India helped China a lot. And it was so possible because China was lagging behind. And even in the year 1939, we find that in Asia, in terms of industrialization, Japan was number one and India was number two. China was far behind. But the problem is that soon after the First World War, India became independent in 1947 and China became communist in 1949. And in 1950, India promulgated the Constitution of the Republic of India. And in that case, we find that China and India, in fact, started nearly at the same time after leaving things behind of the past. Now the problem is that in India, there was a democratic government under Jawaharlal Nehru and there a communist government under Mao Zedong. Jawaharlal Nehru, though he posed to be a very strong nationalist, but he was in fact a timid person. He was not strong. He was not in fact a person to take a strong decision. And that's why the first goal India in fact received within their goal was. What is that? That the Western countries, because of the establishment of communism in China, did not want the communist government of China to represent the whole of China to the United Nations Organization. On the other, the Taiwanese government, the nationalist Chinese government, it was in fact a government of a very small area, that is Taiwan. In that case, they requested India to take the position of the permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. But the Jawaharlal Nehru, he simply uttered one thing: China is a great Leviathan. China should be given that position, not India. And in that case, as the Western countries were not ready at all to give it to Communist China, they made the Chinese nationalist government of Taiwan as the permanent member of the UN Security Council. So nowadays we understand what importance this post in fact holds on, and because of that India is trying now level west to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council, but that was readily given to India. Jawaharlal Nehru simply spurned it away. It's a big problem. Then we find that the relationship with China, of course, apparently wanted to improve it. Zhou Enlai came to India in 1954 most probably, and then these fivefold principles of Panchashil, of peaceful, for peaceful to coexistence, were promulgated by both the countries. But we find that China, of course, had a design differently to occupy Tibet, and the Dalai Lama came to India as a refugee. On the other, India did not prepare anything all along the border. Defense was very, very weak. Air Force, Army, Navy, everything very, very weak. Jawaharlal Nehru, just in the name of peace, in the name of non-alignment, wanted to become the world leader, but he did not do much to save the borders of his own country. So in the year 1962, we find that India was attacked by China. Though, according to foreign accounts, as we find it, Nehru was also, and his defense minister V.K. Krishna Menon, they were responsible to some extent, because though India was totally unprepared in terms of war and defense preparedness, but India followed a forward motion of setting up posts all along the border. So it was in fact, whether true or not, we do not know. If without any kind of preparation he followed this kind of movement, that was wrong. On the other, Jawaharlal Nehru was so much biased in his own favor that during 17 years of his premiership, he did not appoint anybody other as his foreign minister. He looked after the foreign minister's portfolio. So in one hand, he was the Prime Minister as well as the Foreign Minister of India. There was no good advisor behind him, but only Krishna Menon. And this Mr. Krishna Menon was not in fact a freedom fighter in India. He was in England, he was Nehru's friend. Nehru called him and he came here and he became the defense minister of India. He was very much talkative, verbose speech, long speech he used to give. This was only his quality, otherwise nothing. National sentiment, critical analysis of international situation, defense preparedness regarding all these things, that man was in fact backward, simply backward. Anyway, whatever it is, in 1962, India got some bruises, no question, because of unpreparedness. The war was stopped ultimately because of the interference first by USA and the Soviet Union. Unilateral ceasefire China declared. Then again another round of war took place. That was in fact in the form of skirmish in Sikkim, all along the border. But in that war India won, and India killed nearly 700 Chinese soldiers, whereas on the rank of India only near about 250 soldiers died. Now the thing is that after Mao Zedong there came Deng Jiao Ping. He followed the path of industrialization. But we know that Mao Zedong's 12 years right from the beginning, that is cultural revolution, damaged China a lot. In spite of that, in defense preparedness, on the other event in making nuclear weapons, China remained far ahead of India. In 1964, they exploded the nuclear bomb. At that time, the government of India wanted to know from Homi Bhabha, one who was running the nuclear research in India for the development of a bomb. He told it would take still more years. In the year 1967, China exploded the hydrogen bomb. Then again, this Homi Bhabha was asked to furnish a report on the progress of the work. Then he again told a few years it will take. Anyway, Homi Bhabha died afterwards because of plane crash. Now the thing is that in India all the time there is a kind of nepotism. Though Homi Bhabha was a great scientist, no doubt, but greater than him at that time, the nuclear scientist was Dr. Meghnad Saha. But Meghnad Saha, as once had very good relation with Netaji Subhas Chandra Bose, he could not tolerate this Meghnad Saha at all. And I don't know whether this Jawaharlal Nehru had some sort of anti-Bengali antipathy or anti-Bengali feeling in his mind, and we are not sure of it, because he in fact nourished another kind of quarrel between Dr. C.V. Raman, scientist, and Meghnad Saha. It's a long story of conflict between C.V. Raman and Meghnad Saha. Anyway, whatever it is, if Meghnad Saha would have been given to the chair and Homi Bhabha as his deputy, I think the war could continue better. Anyway, because of frustration, some other things, diseases maybe, but frustration is counted more. Meghnad Saha had died. Anyway, this part is one thing. Now come to the relationship between India and China after Deng Jiao Ping. After Deng Jiao Ping, we find China advanced by leaps and bounds, and it became gradually the number one industrialized nation in the whole world. Now China's GDP is 20 trillion GDP, whereas India's is only 4 trillion. 5 times bigger is their economy, 5 times bigger is their GDP. On the other, in different sectors, they have become self-sufficient in making of armaments, in making aircrafts, fighter aircrafts, even passenger liners. They more or less have become self-sufficient. 6th generation fighter aircraft also they have made. Hypersonic weapons, this and that. In space research, they have already challenged the USA, and USA is now rather say just on the par with China. Now, in considering all these things, USA cannot become India's friend. It is not that right from the year 1947 we find that America, though during the period of Dwight D. Eisenhower, we find he wanted to set up good relationship, and even John F. Kennedy wanted to set up good relationship, but this phenomenon then Jawaharlal Nehru damaged the prospect of that relationship. So early relationship was gone. Relationship, of course, was set up with the Soviet Union. We find R.S.P. Kosygin, Bulgarin, Brezhnev, all these people of Soviet Union had very good relationship with India, and even in 1971, when India had to fight war against China, against Pakistan for the liberation of Bangladesh, at that time Soviet Union was steadfast behind India, and the USA sent the 7th Fleet, and that was also nullified in one sense that Soviet Union had declared that Soviet Union had already some nuclear submarines into the Indian Ocean. Whether they had it or not, but it worked a lot. Now come to China. China is now Russia's friend. China is number 2 in the whole world. In different cases, we find China is number 1 also. And in the coming years, in 10 to 20 years, China will overtake the USA. USA's present president is a sick man. He is in fact a man of dirty mind, this Donald Trump. India respected him too much. Modi respected him too much. But what in return he has given? He has taken the side of Pakistan. On the other, the Republican Party members in the parliament outside and even in the government, they are accusing India only for buying wealth from Russia. That is not the only case. Why then the Army General of Pakistan, Nasib Muni, should be called to the President's palace for lunch or dinner, whatever? And it is very, very bad that man has become hungry for Nobel Prize. On the other, it is very much disrespectful to a country to say that I have stopped this Sindoor operation, just telling India that for the sake of trade with the USA, you have to stop the war. Oh, he reprimanded India that if India would not stop the war, then America would stop trade with India. Now, he has imposed rather kind of sanctions. 50% tariff means what? It's a kind of sanctions. So, in such a condition, unreliable to USA, it had never been a friend of India, and it became friend of India only for few years. India should come out of the Quad. It is useless for India. India, for this Quad, should not become enemy of China and Russia. So, it is a good turning that at Tianjin, these two leaders, Modi and Xi Jinping, had meeting, and they promised to forget all the bloody days of the past since Galwan, and now there is lull, there is peace all along the border, and they are now aspiring to increase trade and commerce between the two countries, reliability to be increased between these two nations, and what Xi Jinping told, cultural relations, that is civilizational relations between India and China. Two neighbors across the Himalayas. 3,000 kilometers of border. So we have to remember it. Now I am not going into detail of the border conflict, the border problem. This will be done by another speech. So I stop it here. Thank you very much for cooperating with me, staying with me. And now I request you to subscribe to my channel, because it is simply an educational channel. It is not being viewed too much. Only people, those who understand all these things, those who like all these things, they only see, but subscription is very less. So I request you to subscribe it, otherwise this will to go down and this channel will not be visible. As I feel it like this, what is the system, I do not know. So thank you very much. Thank you.